If you're in the mental health industry and want to grow your impact, your reach, and your organization, you need to be at the Mental Health Marketing Conference. This October 7th through 9th, join hundreds of marketers, executives, and clinicians for 3 powerful days of inspiration, strategy, and networking. From AI to storytelling, from branding to market strategy, you'll leave with actionable ideas, meaningful connections, and access to industry experts. It's so much more than a conference. It's a community. Visit mhmarketing.org to learn more and grab your ticket today. Attend in person in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville, or attend online and see me as one of the keynotes. And use discount Joe to get an extra 10% off any ticket. Again, that's mhmarketing.org and use promo code Joe to get an extra 10% off any ticket. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1241. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I'm so excited to be hanging out with you today. We help people build thriving private practices they absolutely love, and our membership community, the Practice Academy, is open. We have 3 tracks within that. I've been waiting to tell you about this because we've been working really hard on our rebranding, on our launch of it. The Practice Academy is for you depending on your phase of practice. We have 3 tracks within it. We have the sustainable solo practice track, we have the group practice launch track, and we have the sustainable group practice track. So every track has its own things within it, its own community, its own live events. We have 12 live events a month that you get to come to. As well, you get discounts on the group practice conference. You get discounts on consulting. All these things for just $195 a month at the time of this recording and the time of this going live. So you're going to want to read more about that over at practiceofthepractice.com/membership. If you want to be with hundreds of other therapists that are growing their practices and wanting to be aligned with kind of how they think about the world. Thinking about aligned, I'm so excited today to have Chris McDonald with me. Chris is a holistic therapist, yogi, meditation teacher, and author. She's passionate about empowering therapists to build meaningful communities where they feel supported and inspired in their work. She guides other therapists to confidently integrate yoga practices with therapy, enhancing healing for both themselves and their clients. She's certified in brain spotting and is a 200-hour RYT and offers gentle yoga to clients in sessions. In her practice, she specializes in the treatment of anxiety, depression, trauma, and grief in young adults. Chris also offers therapy for therapists, clinical supervision, and is host of Yoga in the Therapy Room podcast. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Joe. It's great to be here. Good to connect with you again.
Yeah, I still remember the moment when I was on my road trip, and I've probably said this anytime you've been on here or done anything else with me. I still remember exactly where I was standing when we were doing consulting and we were talking about the podcast, and we kind of landed on the first name. Like you've changed it since then.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, now we can start moving forward. I don't know why it's like that moment
that stands out,
but it just felt like we're here. Like Chris is going to do this. Let's do it. So take me back to even when you started the podcast and how you thought about it then compared to how you're thinking about it now.
Great question. So originally it was called the Holistic Counseling Podcast, and you helped me come up with that name, and I so appreciate your support with that because I've always been drawn to holistic modalities, and I started integrating more holistic modalities many years ago when I was a school counselor, starting with breathwork. Then I moved to meditation and then some yoga. I got more training and got certified in 2019. And what I realized with the podcast, it was getting too broad, and the holistic realm is huge. Mm-hmm. In case you didn't know, there's so many branches, and I realized that I needed to niche down. It was just what kept coming up for listeners was they wanted to learn how I integrate yoga into clinical sessions. No matter how many times I asked, it was the same thing over and over. So last year I was like, you know what? I am so aligned with my personal yoga practice and with yoga with clients. I think it's time to move forward to bring the whole podcast all about yoga. And everybody I have on the podcast, they are required to be a somatic therapist, a yoga teacher, and integrate the body in some way. And somatic practices are growing so much in the counseling world, which is beautiful to see. And that's kind of where I landed is let me see if I can help therapists so they can bring yoga practices into sessions ethically and safely.
Mm. I mean, I think it's great. It's funny because it's like when you think about a holistic therapist, that's pretty
Yeah.
niched in. But then to say, you know what, I'm noticing something bubbling up here, and I'm noticing something, in society, in the counseling world, in your own life, and saying, you know what, I'm going to focus specifically on yoga and therapy. I love that. I think that
Yeah,
that's
thanks.
it's like any time in our career when we realize something that used to really work for us no longer works, to give ourselves permission to just let go of that thing. There can be that sunk cost fallacy where it's like, I've put all this time into this brand or
Yeah,
into this
exactly.
podcast or this image. Like, what happens if I lose that? And just take me through that. The switch from the first name to now where you're at. Like, was there a lot to kind of undo and change? Was
Oh
it
my
tough?
gosh.
Was there a lot of mental,
Yes.
like, what the heck am I doing?
There was many of that. This was last summer, so I made a plan actually a year now, year ago in June, I made a plan to relaunch in September last year. And I was kind of panicked, to be honest with you. As you know, there's a lot of back work with podcasts. And if you rebrand, you got to rebrand everything. So it was a lot of work, but I was able to sort it out, figure out a schedule for myself. But you know what's interesting, Joe? I'm glad you asked this question. There was grief.
Mm.
Emotionally, I felt grief. I felt sad. Like, wow, so this is not what I thought it was going to be. So I had to work through that grief in my own work with my own therapist and on my own. But I was able to process through it and then look at this as a new beginning. So when one thing ends, another begins. So really dove into the launch last September.
Mm-hmm. Well, and how have you kind of looked at, and maybe you don't even view it as a success, but how have you looked at that, whether that was a good decision or a wise decision to switch the branding around it?
It's perfectly aligned. I know we talked about this before we hit record, that everything is in alignment now for me. It just lights me up to talk about yoga. I feel so excited to bring these practices to clients as well as other therapists. And also is alignment because this has helped me to have other offerings outside of sitting in the therapist chair. So I offer a course for therapists called Yoga Basics and met with many therapists and got their feedback about what are they looking for when they want to integrate yoga and therapy, and put all that together for a course, an online course. And that's everything's alignment. So the yoga in the therapy room, yoga basics course, it's all within the same niche. So, and I have met so many amazing therapists along the way who are just as excited as I am, that's the other piece of this, Joe, is creating that community. And I have a Facebook group called Bringing Yoga in the Therapy Room, and everybody connects there, very supportive, because we're not a huge population of therapists. So it's so nice to have that community build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about yoga in therapy sessions. So, I mean, I think about my own experience with
Sure.
yoga. So I did yoga in college because they had some deal at the rec center for X number of dollars. You could go to 10 sessions. I'm like, well, I'll try it. And I didn't know at the time that like my lower back, that I had been born with a spinal stenosis. So that's why I could never touch my toes. And so doing a downward dog never felt relaxing to me because I could barely like touch the ground. And so for me, yoga was always this like, why is this so hard for me? And then probably in the last 6 months, I started doing more yin yoga and warm yoga and like hot flow yoga, where it's like not the athletic ab sculpting kind of version,
Exactly.
but it's more just like kind of meditative. And the place that I go, it's like you pay a monthly, like all you can yoga kind of thing. And it's been nice to just try different teachers to understand like what I need. Before we dig into yoga in the like in your practice, maybe let's talk about just misconceptions with yoga in general, because I know that there's like the
Yeah,
Americanized version of yoga that can go
for
from
sure.
sculpting your body all in Lululemon pants all the way to just like, I mean, different version. Goat yoga, I just saw that there's penguin yoga.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which I gotta tell you, I've never even touched a penguin. Having a penguin climb on me while doing yoga does not sound terrible. So but, like, let's talk about misconceptions with yoga, and then we'll talk about yoga in the counseling room.
Yeah. And the yoga that I'm talking about, just to be clear, that misconception that we're doing a yoga class, that is not correct. That's often what people think about. How do you do a yoga class for therapy? It's not, it's integrative. So we do it as part of a session. Sometimes it may be at the beginning of a session, maybe just a few minutes to ground, maybe breath work, and maybe just one yoga movement. Asana is the physical practice. And I think that's the other piece, is that people think of yoga and they think of just the movement. But there's 8 limbs of yoga. And when we bring in the therapy room, we can bring in any of those limbs. So we can bring meditation, we can bring breath work, and also integrate with the asana, the physical practice. Sometimes it might be more intuitive in the middle of a session. I'm more somatically based. So if a client seems like they're getting more anxious or they have trauma and they seem like they're really getting dysregulated, I may interrupt them and say, can we pause a moment? Let's notice what's happening in the body. And offer an invitation. It's all invitation, trauma-informed yoga. What would it feel like to place both hands on the chest? Inhale, arms out to the side. Exhale, hands back to the chest. Just as an example of one practice we could do. Or some people like to have it before we end the session. So I'm always watching the clock and we'll see like, okay, how much time we got? Okay, maybe we could do 2 practices today. And I invite them, would that be something that you'd like to do before we end today? So it's one of those clinical judgments of when would this be good for this person, but also a collaboration with the client. And talking up front, before we even start, I offer information about the yoga practices that I offer within the first consultation, the free consultation I give, and let them know that's an option. It's not required because we have to respect client autonomy. And if we want to bring it in an ethical way, we really have to make sure we're doing that. And not to satisfy that, oh, I want to do yoga with clients because I like yoga. This is all about the client and what is best for them and aligned with the treatment plan as well. So if they have generalized anxiety disorder, then we can bring it in as part of that intervention to help with that disorder or whatever issues they're facing. And there's just so many organic ways we can bring it in. And it is a skill. And that's why I created my course as well, because it's not always intuitive. We didn't go to school and learn this. So this is something that you have to get training outside of school and to figure out.
Yeah, so let's talk training. So when it comes to integrating yoga, is it enough to be a regular practitioner? Like, is it like, do you have to be a full-on yoga teacher with your like 2,000 hours, or like what can people, I guess, that are just listening integrate in that it doesn't do damage or like kind of bastardize yoga? And what are the things that really you should get extra training in before you bring it into the session?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, because a lot of people have that misconception that you have to be a 200-hour yoga teacher, that you have to have that much training and call yourself a yoga teacher. But I'm here to tell you, you don't. As part of our ethical codes, I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I've looked at all our ethical codes. I've looked at the social workers. I've looked at all the other acronyms for licensed professionals out there. And basically everything, we have to just have some training. We have to have the competence is what we're looking at. It is within our scope of practice, but we have to build the competence. And before we even get to training, we have to do the practices ourselves. We have to embody this work before integrating with clients and really see what it feels like in our bodies in order to effectively bring it in a session. So getting some training, and with my training too, it's 12 hours. So it is a good way to start to get some simple practices. And the other part of this misconception is that we need a yoga mat and yoga pants and we have to wear special clothes, and it's not at all. It's such gentle, simple practices that everybody can do from a seat. We can do some seated or standing practices. You don't even need a mat. So there are some that are a little easier too. If you want to start bringing yoga in your therapy room, therapist, you can start just with some grounding, and you may already be doing some of that. Or bringing in some breath work. That helps to get some training in that. So once we move into the breath work realm and then the movement, the asana, then it's important to have some training for that. And of course, supervision is part of our ethical guidelines too, just to get some consultation support as you bring some of these yoga practices in is important.
Yeah. Listen, I didn't take insurance in my counseling practice because I had no idea how to handle it. The process of accepting insurance outside of a group practice can be tough, but most people looking for mental health care want to use their benefits to pay for sessions. If you're like me and you feel a little scared about taking insurance, or you just want to make it easier on yourself, and you're interested in seeing clients through insurance, Alma can help. They make it easy to get credentialed with major insurance plans at enhanced reimbursement rates. They also handle all the paperwork, from eligibility checks to claim submission and guaranteed payment within 2 weeks. Plus, when you join Alma, you'll get access to time-saving tools for intake, scheduling, treatment plans, progress notes, and more in their included platform. It's going to make it so much easier for your team, so you can spend less time on administrative work and more time offering great care to your clients. Visit helloalma.com/Joe. That's helloalma.com/Joe to get started. So take us through maybe some of the breathwork things that just someone listening right now could enact, or maybe that they could even enact in their own life. And then let's dig into more misconceptions after that too. But like, what are just some things that you would say are pretty basic that, probably align with a lot of what we've been taught in the therapy world that maybe we're just framing a little differently through the yoga lens?
Absolutely. The first step, and everybody can do this right now with me, is just to notice your breath. So take a moment. Notice, are you having shorter breaths or deeper breaths? Where do you feel it? In your chest or your belly? So that can be the first step, is just following the breath. And you can give them an anchor to notice in the chest. Do you feel the chest rise and fall with your breath? Or in the belly? Or even just in the nose? And sometimes with trauma, it is a good place to start, because changing breath can be triggering for people that have complex trauma. So we want to be really mindful of that to integrate in a safe way. But you can also bring in just gentle practice of breath to inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth like you're blowing out through a straw. This is called straw breathing. To me, it's one of the simplest, most accessible that every therapist can use. And the point is to have a longer exhale than an inhale. And that's what turns on that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calmer nervous system, especially with anxiety, so that clients can get more regulated and get into their window of tolerance. And the good part of this too is that these are tools they can practice at home for homework. So it really helps to empower clients that they have something they can do to help themselves to regulate their nervous system. And that's what I find a lot of clients that come to me, they've been wanting tools. They want some things that can help open their window of tolerance so they're not as reactive to stressors. And I teach it from a preventative model. Don't just wait until you're on that scale of 1 to 10. If 10 is the worst and you're so stressed out and you can't breathe and you're having a panic attack, it's not going to be as helpful. But if you can find your internal cues that I'm starting to get anxious, I feel it in my chest, do the breathing then. And also do it as a regular practice. The more that we can do these as a regular practice consistently each day, no matter what's going on, the more that we're going to change neural pathways and change the brain. We have that power.
Now, take me through situations that you've seen, and obviously no client details that are identifying, but like where you've seen yoga help someone in a situation that you think yoga uniquely helped someone get to a place in a session that probably wouldn't have happened had you not been integrating yoga into the session.
Oh, absolutely. So many stories. I also offer therapy intensives, which are 3-hour sessions. So those have been profoundly helpful for people, because I do integrate yoga. And I did have one client with severe PTSD. She never could relax, couldn't sit still, could barely sit for the session, would stand up at times. And once we started to do some of these body-based practices, she was able to ground, to be more settled. And it was amazing, because it was like the angels appear, right? Because at the end of the session, she's like smiling, her shoulders are down. You can see her whole body is more relaxed and calmer. And over time, she was able to get to a more regulated place more often and no longer met the criteria for PTSD. Now, granted, I integrate with brain spotting as well, so it's not a standalone practice, but it is part of it. So my full integration is, if I do trauma work, I do brain spotting with yoga practices. And it's been just so effective to see the results.
Yeah. So like when you see those results, like what does that look like? And how would you say yoga is really like digging in deeper and helping the groundedness?
Well, as you know, the body keeps the score. And trauma is stored in the body. And so many emotions are. It doesn't even have to be trauma. And as we suppress emotions, either consciously or subconsciously, it's going to go somewhere. So many times I will notice in session that people might have their shoulders up to their ears, and we may bring awareness there, bring some movement into the shoulders. And sometimes they just notice a release or letting go. It's just doing these practices really help to connect to the deeper parts of sensation. And it's also a part of interoception practice, noticing what's going on inside of us. Like if you have a full bladder, you got to go to the bathroom, or your stomach's rumbling, you got to get something to eat. But the same thing, that clients often are disconnected from their bodies. They live from the neck up. So with these practices, we bring a slow, mindful approach with many pauses so they can check in. What do you notice after that practice? Where do you feel sensation? What's your energy level? Check in with your mind. Is your mind racing, or is it more still? Or maybe it's stuck somewhere. So these kinds of informational questions can really help them to drop in a little more. And what research shows is the more we can develop interoception, the more clients can be emotionally regulated.
Now, I'm wondering, as people get more advanced in their kind of integration of yoga in the therapy sessions, what are some of the misconceptions of people that aren't brand new? Some of the things we covered at the beginning were kind of brand new misconceptions.
Sure.
What about people that are regular practitioners that, maybe even have yoga training? What misconceptions are there that we should discuss?
Yeah. And some people tell me too, that's not evidence-based. Yoga has so much evidence for anxiety, depression, PTSD. So there is some hesitation, especially people who are older, who have had training long, long time ago. They don't really have the familiarity or training with somatic practices. And so they come at this like, you can't do that. Yes, we can. And what I found is that another population that really love my podcast in my group is they have some yoga training, but from a studio. And guess what? Studios don't talk about therapy sessions, and how and when to integrate in sessions has been the most difficult part. And I think that leaves a lot of therapists on the sidelines like, how do we bring it in a session? What's that look like? And it is a struggle for many to be able to make that shift, because we're taught just to do talk therapy and a lot of CBT approaches. But what I found, and the other reason I wanted to mention that too, that I moved towards somatic practices, CBT is limited. Talk therapy is limited. And if you've seen a client for a long time, you may have noticed we hit a wall and progress stops because we need to get into the body, period. And I think a lot of people struggle moving to that somatic base lens. But once they do, it opens up a whole new world for them. And they're able to see the benefits right away, both for themselves and for their clients. Because if they're embodying these practices themselves, they're going to be more regulated as a therapist, as a person, which helps with that co-regulation in the sessions.
So the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Love this question. I say be brave. So if you've thought about bringing yoga practices or any other modality you haven't tried yet, just see it as an experiment. See how this goes. Get the client permission and go for it. A lot of people get held back and overthink, especially as therapists. I know I'm one. And, oh my gosh, I don't want to cause harm and this. But just start slow, start small, take your time with it, and you can make a huge difference when you do. So just reminding yourself that you got this.
So awesome. If people want to follow your podcast, get your course, where can we send them, Chris?
Yeah, yogainthetherapyroom.com. I have a private practice also at pathtohopecounseling.com if anybody's interested.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
I remember when I was in high school, I was really interested in integrating kind of art therapy and the arts in therapy as I was thinking about college and what I wanted to do. And then I realized I really like art, but I didn't really want to do art therapy. I realized as I kind of went through undergrad that experiential approaches to therapy were a lot more interesting to me. So high ropes courses, activity-based therapy with kids. And, I ran the Sail Champion program for a while where we took students out on this 50-foot wooden sailboat, sort of like a pirate ship, and did therapy right on the sailboat. Saw amazing outcomes. I think the therapy needs innovators that say, hey, I'm really into this thing. I'm into yoga. I'm into experiential approaches to sailing, and I want to merge those things together. And how can we take our best practices from areas where there is research and also say, if we were to be the inventors of this, what would be the code of ethics? How do we protect risk? How do we have liability forms and disclosure and all those things? I think sometimes, in graduate school and in our trainings, we're so taught to stay in line for what's been done that we're fearful of innovating. And all the things that we learn about the history of psychology and people doing things, it's often saying, okay, I got this training in this area. What if we merged these things together? Or what if we took what I learned from my supervisor and adjusted it a little bit? You look at all the greats of the psychology world. They usually took something they learned and added a twist to it and added a little bit different thing to it. It's sort of like, inventing a new recipe. You don't just start from scratch. You go off of what you already know. And that's what I love about what Chris is doing here is she's taken two worlds that she's so connected to and saying, let's create some best practices here, some training, some supervision, a community of people that can have conversations and continue to improve yoga in the therapy room. Being in community helps you to get that feedback, to grow faster, and to really innovate in ways that you probably wouldn't do on your own. So we'd love for you to connect with Chris's content. Also, if you want to join the Practice Academy and be around other innovative thinkers, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/membership. We'd love for you to hang out with us in there. We do calls 3 times a week where you're getting live feedback on whatever phase of practice you're in. We would love to help support you there. Thank you so much to Alma for being our sponsor today. I wish Alma had been around when I had my private practice. I had no idea what I was doing. That's why I didn't take insurance. But if Alma had been there, I would have. And there's no reason that as a clinician, you should be spending hours on paperwork to bill for insurance, or not knowing for sure that you'll get reimbursed for sessions with your clients. If you're interested in seeing clients through insurance, but don't want to navigate the process and paperwork on your own, Alma can help. They make it easy to get credentialed with major insurance plans at enhanced reimbursement rates and a guaranteed payment within 2 weeks. Visit helloalma.com/Joe. That's hello, ALMA.com/Joe to get started. Thanks for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.